the main objective of this presentation is to learn all about Memo. So at the end of this presentation, you will be able to actually write a memo. You will be able to identify the main parts of a memo, the protocol, and the audience, the tone, and the style. So we will be answering these questions. Question number 1, what is a memo? Question number 2, what is the function of a memo? What is the protocol used when writing a memo? What's the memo's audience, style, and tone? What is the format used when writing a memo? And this is actually the practical part that we need to work on. What are the organization strategies used, and how is the memo routed? To start with the definition of a memo or a memorandum, it is something to be remembered, and you need to know that the main or the chief function of a memo is to record information of immediate importance and interest in the busy world of work. Memos are usually brief and informal, but they can also contain official announcements and information that serve a variety of functions, like they tell a procedure, they are used to make an announcement, changing a policy, providing a brief summary, calling a meeting, and so on. Memos are usually written for an in-house audience, but like I mentioned before, they also can be used for externally. Memo protocol. When writing a memo, you need to be timely. That is, you need to send a memo at appropriate time, not at the last minute, so the reader can have enough time to follow the instructions or be updated, etc. You need to be professional. You need to make sure that your memo is error-free, spelling mistakes-free, punctuation mistakes-free, etc. You need to be tactful, respectful, polite. You need to also be careful and you need to make sure that you send the memo to the appropriate personnel, because like I mentioned before, sometimes the memo can contain confidential information, so you need to make sure that you're sending it to the correct person. And you also need to know that a memo can be sent up and down the corporate ladder, that the manager can send it to any employee, the employee can send it to the manager, the employee can send it to a coworker, and so on. Now, this memo, how do we send it? Do we send it as an email, or do we send it as a hard copy? All options are acceptable, or all options are accepted. So you can send it as a hard copy, you can send it as an email, or you can send it in an email attachment or as an email attachment, depending on the company's policy. But in certain situations, you must send the memo as a hard copy. These situations are when the memo contains official documentation, when it has confidential message, when it discusses a sensitive financial information, or when it makes a budget request. So in these cases, you must send it as a hard copy. The memo's audience, style, and tone. You need to know who you're sending your memo to. So you need to know who your audience are. You need to know what their needs, what they need to know. For the content, once you identify the audience needs, you are able to know the content, and then you can adapt your tone and your style and tone accordingly. So for the content, you need to answer the questions: what, when, who, where, why, the cost, and the technology that you will be using in your memo. For the style and the tone, once you know who your audience are, then you're able to adapt your style and tone. For example, if you're sending the memo to a coworker, so then you can use a casual posture, or you can use a casual tone or a casual posture. You can be friendly. When you're sending to your manager, though, you need to adapt a more official tone or posture. When you're sending it to people you supervise, you have to be official, you have to be straightforward, yet you have to consider your readers' feelings. And sometimes you send the same memo to multiple audience. Then in this situation, for example, you're sending it to your coworker and to your manager at the same time. So in this situation, you must use or you must adapt a formal and official posture. This is the practical part of the memo. For this part, we have figure 4.1, figure 4.2, and figure 4.3 to use as models. You need to know that each memo has two parts. Part 1, the header, and part 2, the message. The header contains 4 lines. The first line is the to line. The second line is the from line, the subject line, and the date line. We will be discussing this in details in the next slide. And part 2 is the message, the actual message of your memo. That's the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. And in the following slides, we will be discussing what to include in the introduction, what to include in the body, and what to include in the conclusion. Before we go on, go back to figure 4.1, 4.2, and 4.3 and identify the to line, the from line, the date line, and the subject line in these figures. Memo part 1, the header. Like I said, in the header we have to write 4 lines. The to line, in the to line, what do I include? You have to include the name and the job title of the receiver. And if you know the person in person that you're sending the memo to a coworker, you can use his first name only. If you're sending it to your manager, you need to use his or her first and last names. And when you're sending it to multiple audience, that you're sending it to 2 or 3 people, then you need to be careful about hierarchy order, that you start from the top to the and go lower. Yani you start with the manager, till you reach your coworker. In the from line, you need to write your name and your job title. Sometimes some companies require you to write your initials. That's the first letter of your first name and the first letter of your last name. Let's say your name is Hadi Awad. Then your initials are HA. In the date line, you have to give the full calendar date. Today, let's say today is March 12, 2020. So you have to write the date exactly like that. In the subject line, you need to mention what the purpose of your memo is. That's the title, and it should summarize your message. Now, in the message part of the memo, we're done with the heading part. Now we're moving to the message or the discussion part. Here we have the introduction, we have the discussion, and then we have the conclusion. What to include in the introduction? The introduction of your memo should tell the readers exactly or clearly about the problem you're discussing, the procedure or the question or the policy that prompted you to write, that pushed you to write this memo. You have to explain briefly any background information the reader needs to know. Let's say the problem occurred before. Some people provided some solutions, but they didn't work out, for example. Or we already had a meeting discussing this procedure, etc. So you need to mention it here. Be specific about what you're going to accomplish in your memo. In the discussion part of the memo, after we finished with the introduction part, where we move to the discussion part, you have to state why a problem or a procedure is important, who will be affected by it, and what caused it, and why. Also, you need to indicate why and what the changes are necessary. Again, refer to the figures to use as models. Give precise dates, times, and locations, and costs. And here it is very important that you use organizational markers in order to highlight the important message to be delivered to the readers. What do we mean by organizational markers? These are the headings, the numbered list, and the underlining techniques that we use in the discussion part of a memo. Also, you can find them in figure 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, and that's actually an exercise that you have to do. So that's exercise 2. Now, to move to the last part of the memo, that's the message conclusion. In the conclusion part, you have to specify how you want readers to respond to their memo. So what's next? You can choose one of these three techniques. Ask readers to call you if they have any questions. Request a reply in writing. You can ask them to write for you, to write back, or to call you over the phone, or to send you an email, or to come visit you in the office, or by a specific date. You have to tell them what time you are available. Provide a list of recommendations that the readers are to accept, revise, or reject. You write your own recommendations and you ask them to either accept them, revise them, or reject them. Another exercise: what kind of conclusion organization used in figure 5.1, 4.2, and 4.3? It's one of these, okay? Now, this prompt that you have to you have to write it and you have to answer it and submit it on the discussion part on the virtual classroom. You run, I don't know if I have enough time to read it, so I'll move to the routing a memo first, then I'll go back to it if I have enough time. Routing a memo, it means how do we send the memo? Who sends the memo to whom? Always verify the names and addresses of the individuals you need to send your memo to. You need to make sure that you're sending the memo to the correct person, and consider the level of official importance and confidentiality of the memo.